Hey there, I'm going to tell you about a thing called the gap theory. This is a theory that blends both creationism and evolution so that both work together in the same time frame. In its most basic form, this theory states that there is a time gap between Genesis 1 verse 1 and Genesis 1 verse 2, where the entire evolutionary process took place. This includes things like the fossils being formed and the age of the rocks that scientists have found, plus the expansion of the universe and the creation of life from abiotic material that is included in this initial creation before Genesis 1 verse 2. As many people know, Genesis begins with the words, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." The second verse of Genesis says, "Now the earth was void and without form, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the deep." Now the gap theory works here because the first verse says that God created the heavens and the earth. And then it says that the earth was void, which could mean that at one point the earth was made and then it became formless afterwards. People who believe this theory say that the earth was destroyed after the initial creation because of a rebellion. This rebellion was from Satan. Satan rebelled against God for whatever reason, it doesn't quite say, and therefore he and his angels were kicked out of heaven because of it. And they were sent to wherever else they could find. So Satan got super upset about this, and in his anger he ended up destroying the entire surface of the earth and all living creatures on it. This leaves room for the fossils to still be around and for the rocks to show great ages and everything. It leaves room for all of those theories to still work beforehand because the evidence was still left behind. So then after this, God recreated the earth, starting over completely, beginning, as we read in Genesis, with the creation of light, and then going on with everything else, such as the separation of waters and this dry land appearing, as well as living creatures in the sea and in the air and everywhere. And once again, everything was perfect and good as God initially intended it to be. This theory was born around the early 19th century or around the late 18th century because of the popularity of evolution. This new theory was out there, and theologists were confused and couldn't disprove it, but also didn't fit with their biblical perspective, and they needed a way for both to work without getting rid of one of them. There are some proofs of the gap theory, besides just the one we already looked at with the two verses, but they don't hold a lot of credibility in them. The first, and most used, is found in Genesis 1 verse 2 again. In our translation, it reads, "The earth was void and formless, and the Spirit of God hovering over the surface of the deep." However, this word "was" could also be translated as "became," making the idea that the world was created and then destroyed a lot more possible. However, this word "was" or "became" is translated as "was" in other parts of the Bible, so it loses some of its credibility there. Psalm 104 verse 30 is also used a lot. This verse reads, "When you send forth your Spirit, they are created, and you renew the face of the ground." But this psalm is not actually talking about creation, so it doesn't really work. It's talking about when God gives life to newborn animals or whatever, or when the seasons change, so not actually talking about the initial creation, the beginning of time. Another reason for the creation of the gap theory is that people needed a place for Satan's rebellion. There are, however, other theories that work for Satan's rebellion. A popular one is that when God created Adam and Eve, Satan became super jealous that God gave him all kinds of authority that was greater than the angels, because God gave Adam and Eve, mankind, authority above the creatures of the sea and above the angels, and give the ultimate authority besides God. And this is also why Satan targeted mankind instead of just causing general chaos, because he went after what God loved the most in his jealous rage. So, in the end, we have to ask ourselves, does the gap theory work with what the Bible teaches us? Short answer, no. Genesis does not say that God had to recreate the world, and Genesis is to be taken literally and as a historically accurate book. The first verse of Genesis is just an introductory statement, not a reference to another time period, making the gap theory completely impossible. Thank you.